Hey everyone, welcome back. Hope you guys are having a great Tuesday. Thank you so much for coming in to watch this video. And I didn't do a video over the last 2 days or so because yesterday the markets were closed because of President's Day, so we didn't have really much news going out from the miners. Bitcoin itself was kind of trading up and down a little bit throughout the weekend anyway, so there's not much going on. So we're back to it now, which is kind of nice, a little bit refreshed. And what we're going to talk about in today's video is going to be just basically what's going on with Bitcoin right now, how the miners did really quick, and then we'll take a look at the short interest on the Bitcoin miners as far as how that's changed over the last time we did this video, which was probably about a month ago. So we'll get into all the details. We'll make it pretty quick here. But as always, you guys know the drill here. This is not financial advice, for entertainment only. Please do your own research, and I'm investing in the following coins and companies for full disclosure. And if you enjoy this type of content, hit the like button, subscribe. Helps me out tremendously, especially hitting the like button. And then any corrections, obviously, will be posted here to Discord, which is through Patreon members, and then YouTube for the YouTube community posts, and on Twitter as well. If there are any mistakes, I always try to make sure that those get out to you guys as fast as we can. Okay, nonetheless, here, let's take a look at what's going on with Bitcoin here. Bitcoin today had a kind of wild day today. It got up to 53,000 and then kind of fell back down here. So if we zoom in on the chart here, we can see what happened today. We can see here that we got to 53,000 for the high, right? And then we came down to a low of 50,764. So almost like a 2,200 and some spread between where we ended up, where we start. Well, not really where we start, but to the highs and the lows is where we got to. So we're still trading sideways here. Looks like a little bit, maybe a little bit to the upside here on Bitcoin over the last couple of days. Nothing major here though. But I'm still thinking that we're battling with the 53,000 mark here, which I think the more times we touch it, nudge it, well, more likely we are to get above it, right? When that's going to happen, I have no idea. The only other thing that we might do is maybe come back down to, I mean, the 50-day support or the 50-day moving average is at 45,000 roughly right now. I don't know if we're going to come back all the way down to that. If that gets basically, if the resistance holds at 53,000, could we fall back down to maybe 48, 45? It's possible, right? Nothing's out of the question here for Bitcoin. But that's kind of Bitcoin in a nutshell right now, what's going on there. And as far as the miners are concerned here, the miners for the most part had a much worse day than Bitcoin did. Bitcoin actually finished up on the day in the plus sign, 0.95%, but the miners, as Bitcoin was starting to fall down in the early morning hours of trading for the stock market, miners took a dive at that point. A lot of the miners were actually trading upwards in the positive column, but they ended up in the bottom here. But we had two miners that were in the plus today. That was BitDeer was up 3.46%, Iris Energy was up 0.88%, and everybody else was pretty much single digits decreases here. So, you know, Bitcoin and the miners work both ways. They're a leverage play to the upside, and they're also a leverage play to the downside. So always something to be mindful of. But that's basically it. We'll see where everything else comes in at later on this week. I don't believe we have any miners reporting their Q4 results here this week. I think we got some maybe next week. So we'll look at those when those do come in. And then if we have any news from the miners, we'll obviously cover it here tomorrow and things like that. Tomorrow we'll also have the live stream probably around, I'm guessing maybe between 7 and 8 o'clock if all goes well. If not, might be a little bit later. But that's where you guys can actually join and then ask live Q&A questions at the end of the video as well. So we'll see what we have for tomorrow. But that's it for that. Let's take a look at what's going on with the shorting of these miners here over the last month, basically. So as you guys know, I track all this data here, just kind of pay attention to see what's being shorted more so than not so. And then how has that changed from basically the last time we did it to now. And I did something different. You guys asked me to do is to use the float shares shorted, not the amount that's outstanding, but the float. And now you guys can correct me on this, but I pulled data from basically Yahoo, Finvins, can't pronounce that, and then Wall Street Journal as well, as far as what they're reporting on the float for each of these. And then if I have data for all three, I basically do the average on it. If I have data for only two of them, like here, I use the average for those two as well. I mean, some of the numbers, as you can see here, are all over the place here. One is reporting, like for Cypher, we got 71 million float. Another one's showing 55 million float. It's like, which one do I go by? Right, if I go by this one, you guys are going to be hassling me, why didn't I use that one? Right, so there's kind of really no winning in this. So I'm using the averages for this. I hope you guys are okay with that. And if not, we can obviously discuss it and make adjustments as needed. But that's kind of what I'm using right now on it all. Okay, so I pulled in all that data. I also pulled in all the data here for the latest two reports that we got, which was on 112 and 131 from the services that I use here on the amount of shares being shorted. And here's what we got. So currently, if we look at the current number of shares shorted, obviously Marathon has the most shares shorted at 46.9 million. Then you would probably go to TeraWolf at 38.9. TeraWolf, we can see why they're being shorted. And we can kind of see also with Marathon as well, right? Marathon hasn't been performing that well recently, but we'll take a look to see how much the number of shares shorted increase or decrease for all these companies here in a minute. And then we'll talk about that, if there's any warrant to this or not. But TeraWolf, obviously 38.9 million here. Then we would have Riot at 35.2. Riot, obviously we know the curtails and things like that. Bitfarm is 29.9, so I was a little bit surprised by that. CleanSpark then would be 24.4, and then you would be the next one, Bet. Cypher, 13.5 million shares, followed by BitDigital at 12.8, and then you got Hut and Hive at 9.5, 9.6 roughly. So, and then everybody else is below, way below that, okay? Now, if we look at the percentage of float shares shorted, we have now TeraWolf leading the pack here with 28% of their float shares being shorted. Then you got Marathon at 21.5, you got Cypher 21.3, Riot at 19%, BitDigital at 14, CleanSpark at 13, Bitfarms at 11%, Hut at 10, along with Hive. And then you go down the list here where you got Bitdeer at 6.7, Sphere at 6.6, Iris at 5, Moss at 4.3, Stronghold at 4, and then you got a couple down here. DMG, we don't have any data on DMG for them, unfortunately. We just started getting data a little bit here on Core, so that's still a little bit of a, how can I put it? The data on that isn't as complete as I would like it to be, to go back, several months or something like that. Okay, but then when we look at shares shorted value versus the market cap, so we're looking at the market cap of the companies, and then what is the number of shares. So if you took the shares, like for Marathon, 46.9 million, multiplied times the 46.9 million shares shorted times the stock price, you get basically 1 billion here in short interest on them compared to their 5.45. So that's roughly 20% of their market cap there, right? So TeraWolf was at 159 million of their 564 million market cap. Cypher 189 of their 891 market cap. Then you got Riot at 632 million, shorted of their 3.3 billion. BitDigital here, very small amount, 38.7 million valued out of their 260 million market cap. CleanSpark 428 out of their 3.2 billion. Bitfarms 132 million of 1.1 billion basically. And you can see the list here, how it goes down as we progress going forward. So the big thing I want to look at here is mainly the change in last time, in the change in the number of shares shorted since the last time we did the video, which was about a month ago. All right, so we're looking at basically 4 weeks out or so. And we can see here that we've seen pretty huge increases in TeraWolf. TeraWolf is up 7.2. In TeraWolf, we know that they have quite a bit of debt, right? But they're paying it off. They paid off about 40 million of it so far by the deadline that they were supposed to do that by, which was April 1st. So that's good there. We'll see if that actually, we see a decrease in that potentially, especially since this data that we do have on it is back from the end of January, right? So we're already, 2.5 weeks into the month of February. We'll see if that data gets updated there, since they reported they have actually paid down a lot of that debt, and then we'll see how they go forward. Right, then you got Marathon. Marathon's only up 1 million shares since the last time. Cypher's up 374,000. You got Riot up 947,000. BitDigital, surprisingly, is down 2.3, almost 2.4 million in shares shorted, and that could be based on them actually reporting that they are now generating revenue from the AI side of the business as well. So maybe that's kind of what's driving that decrease in short interest there. People are thinking, well, they're going to have, possibly $15 million in revenue extra per year for the next 3 years from the AI stuff. But we still need to see, kind of my thoughts on it at least, is we need to see what is the profit margin on that. All right, so that's kind of my only question there. Then you got CleanSpark, huge increase here in the number of shares being shorted to 8 million. And I think this was mainly because of, they reported their Q1 number, when was it, like the 8th or the 9th of February, right? So at that point, this wasn't taken into account. So I wonder if that's going to decrease here going for them as well. And I think maybe some people were shorting it based on the assumption that they weren't going to do that well in the earnings, which they did. And maybe some people might have gotten burned on the short interest that they had on CleanSpark because of that. Okay. Bitfarms 6.8, which is also pretty high here. And then you got HUT at only 190,000 increase, Hive at 636,000, BitDeer negative 184,000. So not really, I mean, it's a good change there, but not really too bad. You got Sphere down 10 million, or that's right, 10,000 shares. Iris down 874,000, Mawson up 243, Stronghold down 120,000, Core up 586. So Core is obviously new. They didn't have any data a couple weeks back because they changed over to Core Z's symbol, stock ticker symbol. Before that, they were at Core ZQ, right, which they were in bankruptcy. So that's, I don't have data going back to that. Argo is down 9,000 shares. Less. DigiHost is down 198,000, and DMG, like I said, we don't have any data on those guys. So this data is a little bit, about 2 weeks old or so, but we can see how things progress, and then we've also seen how things have done since then. So that's why I'm saying like CleanSpark might be a change here. I think people were just kind of thinking that the numbers were going to be pretty bad here. Okay, now when we look at the actual data here for all of these guys here, it's tough because some of these are obviously small amounts being shorted as far as number of shares being shorted on them. And it's hard to put it all into a graph where we can go through it all one by one. But we can kind of see the numbers here, how they stack up for Argo. And Argo was at 0.68 million. They came down all the way down to 0.2, started going back up a little bit here then through, this would have been October, and then November went down, continued to go down here a little bit, then they went back up through December, and then down again. So they've been kind of up and down a little bit here. And then when we look at BitDeer has seemed to me like it's kind of increasing here steadily over the last couple months here, looks like. They started out at 0.07 million shares. They're now up to 1.58 million shares, so we're seeing a more steady increase in them. BitDigital, kind of up and down all over the place, depending on, I guess, where Bitcoin price goes, where the miners go, in fact, where the price of the stocks go. And at that point, they either short more or they short less, depending on how things progress, right? So if the miners come down in price, they kind of short less a little bit here, which is what we kind of saw here in January. Obviously, the miners had a pullback of about 50% or so, so we're possibly going to be seeing some of these guys at least come back down a little bit towards the time frame. But Bitfarms here, you can see Bitfarms has continued to have more and more shares shorted, which is surprising because they're actually doing pretty well, right? They're executing well as far as their growth in Argentina, Paraguay, also here in the US and Canada. And they're actually planning on growing their hash rate. They paid down their debt. They're starting to stack a little bit onto their HODL as well. So I'm surprised by this one that the short interest is increasing on Bitfarms. Next is Cypher. Cypher has been kind of all over the place here as well. Started out from when we started tracking them at about 9 million shares. Got to a high of 14 million in October, and then came back down to 10.7 million here in middle of December. And then we're back up here through, obviously, in January, but still not that bad. Still lower than where they were in October on that one. Then when you look at CleanSpark here, CleanSpark is also kind of been going down since we started tracking them, then going back up, down a little bit, and then back up here as well. So that's going to be interesting to see how that actually looks when we get the data for probably in the middle of this month here. And as far as how much short interest or short number of shares being shorted on them, especially since they provided good numbers for their quarterly results here in Q1. Okay, excuse me. Next is Core. Core, like I said, don't have much data on them except for the last reporting date here, which is on 11/31/24, and that's only at 0.59 million shares. Then we got DigiHost, same thing, pretty small numbers here as well. It's kind of hard to tell on the chart here because, I mean, you can barely see the numbers as it is. But we started out 0.26, and then looks like we went down and up, down, down, down. Kept going down here through October, through November, through December, and then we started going back up here a little bit in middle of December, and through the end of December, and up in January, and then back down here at the end of January. So kind of interesting in that one as well. Then you got DMG, we don't have any data on them. Hive, also pretty low shares being shorted here for them. And then we kind of flat here around the 9 million mark here or so towards the end of the year, or the beginning of January, actually. HUT, okay, HUT, this is the data that we have before they merged with USBTC. This is the data that we have after they merged with USBTC. So it's been kind of up and down a little bit, but not really huge changes in that one. Iris Energy has also been kind of up and down. It's been going down from June all the way through, looks like September, and then September started to pick back up here through October, November, into December, yeah, towards the end of December, and then it started to come back down a little bit here. So that's interesting as well to take a look at that. Then you got Marathon here. Marathon's been kind of all over the place as well. Their biggest short was back on around November 15th at 53.9 million shares shorted. And then it's come down to 44.9 here in middle of December. It's come back up here through the middle of January, 49.3, but it's back down here a little bit as well. So, I mean, they're still heavily shorted as it is. And then you got Mawson. Mawson, I mean, you guys can see the numbers there. I'm not going to go over it. It's pretty small. Riot, pretty flat here at the beginning of the period that we were tracking. Then they increased, obviously, through November, middle of November at least. Then they came back down, and they're hovering around the 30-some million mark here, so that's not too bad. Haven't seen any huge increases in short interest on them. And then we got Sphere here, obviously one of the smaller ones as well. They've been beaten down quite a bit here recently. Maybe that's why the short interest is kind of staying low, I think, but it might be increasing here. Well, it increased a little bit here in January, down a little bit towards the end of January, but not much. Okay, and then we got TeraWulf here. TeraWulf has continued to have increases in the number of shares being shorted here on them. As we get closer to obviously the halving event and the time frame for them to pay off their debts, the 40 million that they had to pay off, which they did. That's what I'm saying. I wouldn't be surprised if this actually decreases quite a bit here next time we report on this, right? Because they already paid down the 40 million here that was due April 1st. So that's kind of the way I would expect things to happen, unless people are still thinking that they may not be able to restructure their debt. And if that's the case, then people might be actually shorting it some more here, okay? And then we got Stronghold here, kind of also all over the place here on the charts. You guys can see the numbers and kind of draw your own conclusions from that one, okay? But that's basically it. The big thing is obviously TeraWulf. Okay, I can understand why people were kind of shorting it more towards the end of January here. Based on their debt, we have the information on them now that they paid down their debt, so we'll see if that changes. CleanSpark, same thing. They were going to be reporting their Q1 report, financial results, and at that point, I could see people, betting against them not to have a good quarter. But after this, I would expect the numbers to drop down a little bit, especially with the huge increases that we saw in the stock price going up after the report. And then Bitfarms is also kind of interesting for me on that one. So we'll have to see how that one plays out, especially when they report their fiscal year-end numbers, I believe, which are going to be possibly sometime early next month, I believe. So that'll be interesting to take a look at. But that's basically it. So we pull in all the data so we can see what's going on, which miners are being shorted more here recently, increase in shares shorted, which ones are decreasing. And it's always good to take a look at that and then see how things have played out. Okay, but that is basically it. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, obviously hit the like button, subscribe, helps me out tremendously. But also the spreadsheets that I have, all of these graphs, all of the data is available to my Patreon members. That's still, you might have a spot open for like the $4 tier, the $5 tier, and you get access to this. And then obviously the $8 tier is still open and you get access to all of these, along with access to the Discord private server that we have, where we have a lot of great conversations there as well. And a lot of great ideas are floating around as far as options and things like that, how people are doing things in there. So everybody's sharing kind of their wealth of information that they have and experience. And it's great because it helps out everybody in the long run. So that is it. I will leave it at that, I think. And then we'll see what happens later on this week. Like I said, I don't know if anybody else is reporting this week. We'll take a look at it. Then we'll take a look at some other data that we have to go over tomorrow on some of these metrics, potentially, not on short interest, but on something else. And then we'll also take a look at maybe some other things, maybe some news stories that happen tomorrow or something like that. But other than that, that is it. This coming Sunday, I will be doing a Twitter Spaces again with the Bitcoin mining stock guy. That'll be at, I believe we're doing that at 12 p.m. Central Time. So if you guys want to take part in that, come in, join us. Put in some questions on there as well. It's open to everybody, as always. So that's always a lot of fun. We spend I think last time we spent like 3 hours on it, 3.5 hours in that space. But it's always a lot of fun. We have some great guests sometimes show up as well, which is fun. But that's basically it. I'm rambling on here, so I'll leave it at that. Again, thank you again for coming in to watch this. Greatly appreciate you guys. I hope you guys have a wonderful night and a rest of the weekend. So I'll see you in the next one. Until then,